Passed the bill to overhaul our patent system. What has the Senate accomplished? Passed the House repeal of healthcare burdens 1099. Passed the bill to overhaul our patent system. The House is waiting for the Senate to pass the rest. That's the problem. I mean, we are, you know, I take the slides out. A lot of my slides say the no do nothing Senate. Well, it really is a do nothing Senate. But I don't need to put that up there. You can see. I mean, that's the problem right now. We have a House that's doing things and a Senate that's doing nothing right now. American Jobs Act. This is the President's Act that was, of course, he talked about last week. Fortunately, there are some areas we agree. There are some things in his overall plan we can agree to. Passing the pending trade agreements. When he talks about it, let's get it done. Of course, he talked about these things almost 6 months ago. Eliminating growth, stifling regulations. Hey, he talks about it, we're talking about it, we're doing it, let's get it done. Eliminating 3% requirement on government payments to contractors. These are things he talked about. We've been talking about this for months. We're glad to hear he's talking about it now. Simplified depreciation schedule for businesses. These are tax loopholes. It's a little, if you're not a CPA, it's hard to understand that, but these are basically loopholes. Hey, we've been talking about them. We're glad to hear he's talking about them. Here are some areas we can work together on. Extension of payroll tax reduction. You know, it's a tax break. We can work together on them with some specific issues to it. Reworking on unemployment benefits. By the way, I have a proposal called the Employ Act, which gives businesses, instead of somebody who's unemployed sitting at home and collecting unemployment, what this does is that if you go to work, the company has to pay you at least 110% of what you get on unemployment, and then instead of that individual getting the, and by the way, so they get paid, they get their payroll, they pay taxes into the system just like any other payroll, and they're learning. So we're taking, and then the unemployment, instead of going to him, 85% of it goes to the employer. And what we've done now is we've given an incentive for people to employ. We've saved money on the unemployment system, which is going to happen anyway. We see that now. If there's unemployment out there that's going to be used, let's use it in corporate, let's use it in a way so that people can train and get people employed. Yesterday, just an update on that, yesterday I actually met, because I submitted this bill in May, and I've been somewhat frustrated that we're getting bipartisan support. As soon as somebody hears about it, they say, what a great idea, and we get more people added onto it. But what I've learned in Washington is it's all about politics. Of course, I'm not a politician, but you have to find the right person who, in leadership, that will take that bill. So yesterday, I met with Congressman Jeff Davis, who heads up the unemployment subcommittee, and finally, I found the guy who said, you know what, I think we can take this up. So hopefully, you'll start to see a little bit of momentum. It compares to what the President talked about the Georgia plan in his speech. Everybody heard that in his speech? The Georgia plan is basically, you're on unemployment, you stay on unemployment, we'll give you some more money to go out and try and train. This takes and changes the whole perspective, puts a person back on the employment rolls, back on the taxpayer rolls, and at the same time trains them. Infrastructure spending, these are all things that we are willing to, I think we're in the willing to work with scenario, but again, we're not going to do it where it's tax money and spending and shovel ready. These are things that are definitely a problem for us. It has to be things that are available to get done and ways to do it without spending the taxpayers' money. Here's some of the areas we plan would hurt more than it helps. Tax increases on our job creations. He wants to eliminate deductions for oil and gas companies, making domestic oil more expensive, eliminate the ability to claim deductions by individuals who make more than $200K, and changing tax treatment of carried interest on depreciation schedules of certain business-related assets. Again, zeroing in and picking on certain areas. The Republican Congress is all for across-the-board tax reform. We're not for individually picking and choosing winners and losers. Another duplicate round of politically motivated stimulus. We're just not for that. We're not for stimulus too. So you're going to continue to hear us say that. He is, we're not. Budget debts and deficits. On September 21, we passed an 8-week continuing resolution cutting $6 billion on the 2011 levels, consistent with spending goals outlined in Path to Prosperity. Again, the green line is our direction, the current path is the red line. If anybody saw what was going on, it's very unique what happened here this last couple of days, and it's worth explaining because it'll show you how Washington works. We have a CR that we have to pass to keep the government open until November. And the reason we were going out to November is that's when the super committee is supposed to come back. So we said, instead of making any decisions, let's see what this super committee does. So let's extend it out 8 or 9 weeks. The Democrats were okay with that. And by the way, it tied into what we've already passed. That's what frustrates me about Washington. We already passed a debt ceiling increase which cut spending, capped spending, and set up for a balanced budget amendment before the end of the year. We've already done that. This current CR that we put on the table is exactly the same numbers as what we passed in August. So we go to the floor, and quite frankly, in any organization, we have extreme right, extreme left, and then we have this bubble in the middle. Now, when I say extreme right, I don't want anybody taking that the wrong way. Here's the way I see extreme. Some people in extreme right, no matter what, are going to drive a stake in the ground and say, this is where I'm at no matter what. The problem is there's very few people in the Republican Party that are there. Because they realize that if you go down there and stand with 435 people and you drive a stake in the ground and say, this is where I'm going, you're probably not going to go anywhere or get anything done. But we only have 240 Republican members. And you need 218 votes to pass anything. So you can figure out there, if you get about 20 people just going against you, nothing can happen. So then you need the Democrats to help you, and there's some moderate Democrats. Now here's what happened last week, and it was an epiphany for me. In fact, I stood up in front of all the Republicans last week and said, I finally realized how you guys play games down here in Washington. I was at dinner with it was a bipartisan group, and I was coming back in the cab with a Democrat who I've gotten to know and has become a friend of mine. And he was saying, this was after the CR bill failed on Wednesday or Thursday this week. And he said to me, Jim, he says, what are we going to do now? And I go, what are we going to do now? I said, you guys voted against it. And all the Democrats voted against it. And of course, 20 Republicans voted against it, which meant that it didn't pass. So, he says, now this is the Democrat speaking, he says, I was for it. He says, and so were about 30 other people for it, because we already saw that we already passed it. Why should we be going back and debate? We got to worry about jobs and the American people, and we've got to move forward. I said, well, if you were for it, why'd you vote against it? And he said, because our leadership said, we're going to show the Republicans that they don't control this House. And he said, we need everybody to vote against it. So all the Democrats pulled their yes votes and went no. The 20 or so Republicans who drove their stake in the ground and said they're not changing voted no. And a bill failed that really is ridiculous, because we already spent 30 days in July talking about this. And we already moved on, and we should move forward from it. But I left that cab ride thinking, this is what we have in Washington. And it's a problem, because you can't have 20 guys controlling the whole effort of where we're going if we're going in the right direction. Now clearly some people might say, well, the House isn't going in the right direction. I respect that. And I respect those 20 votes, don't get me wrong. But are we going in the right direction? I guess that's what the people will have to decide. And I'm talking about not the whole government, I'm talking about the House majority. Are we going in the right direction? We have not passed one bill that raised expenditures. Every bill we've passed has cut expenditures. We've cut overburden regulations. We've done everything we were sent down there to do. Now I know there are some people that say, we want you to do it now. No more waiting, right now. We'll talk about that when we're done with the slides as to what the problem is with doing that and trying to get it done right now. So the President's current path, As the budget shrinks, this is the Budget Control Act. Remember, the Budget Control Act is where the direction that Republican Congress is trying to take. These are major spending cuts passed. We just talked about all those. You can hit the next slide. We'll try and move through these quickly. But you can see $604 billion, $39 billion, $900 billion, $15 billion, FAA authorization, cuts deficits by 19.5, $750 million. The appropriation bills that we've passed so far, $5.624 billion cut. If we would be able to go in our direction, the House direction, the green line is where we're going. 20% of GDP is where we need to get our spending at in this country. It's what we've spent over the last 200 years. That's where we need to go. The President's budget continues to take us to 25% and growing. What are the next steps? The Employee Act, that's my act. I'm hoping we get that done. You know, when people say, I love this, and I'm probably going to hear it on Wednesday, what are you doing to bring jobs? What am I personally doing? The Employee Act is one thing, and I got to tell you, I'm working my tail off to get that act through. I did a jobs fair, hosted 61 employers offering over 1,000 jobs. We had a tremendous outpouring of people that have gotten jobs. I've had people come to me and say, thank you so much, because what I did is I brought the job creators to the people on unemployment, and we were able to get jobs. We were able to get some people jobs. Third thing I'm doing, and I'm kind of doing this quietly, but I have started to meet. It's interesting because I had some Democrats come over to me and say, you are the most logical, reasonable Republican on the other side. You don't throw hand grenades. You don't, and you know what, there's no reason throwing a hand grenade in some of these. When I say throwing hand grenades, if you're in some of these hearings or if you watch these hearings, you'll see the Democrats get up and say, oh, those crazy guys over there don't know what they're talking about. And you get some Republicans getting up and saying, well, those crazy guys over there, they don't know what they're talking about. And then they'll get Jim Renacci not saying a word. Well, the reason Jim Renacci is not saying a word, I don't want to waste my time doing that. They call that opening statements. You're going to notice, if you ever see it, I don't do an opening statement. Because opening statements are only an opportunity to give yourself the position of what you think about the other side, mainly. I like to move on to the facts and get to the witnesses. And what you'll find out in those hearings, when we have witnesses, I don't throw hand grenades. And it's interesting. If you watch some of these, you'll see both sides. The first thing they'll do is they'll throw a hand grenade about the other side, and then they'll ask the witness a question. What you'll notice is that I just ask a question, and I try and get to the details. So I had a couple of Democrats come over to me and say, you don't seem like a guy who's throwing hand grenades. You seem like a guy that just wants to get things done, so do we. And I said, well, if you have some of those guys, I've got some of these guys that just want to get down here and get things done. We don't like Washington. We just want to fix things. So we started having meetings, and quite frankly, we have 12 guys now, 6 Republicans and 6 Democrats that meet on a regular basis, and we talk about ideas as to how we can move things forward. It's too bad the 12 of us aren't the super committee, because we probably would fix things. And I tell you, when you get in a room with 6 Democrats who want to do things and 6 Republicans who want to do things, you'd be amazed how much the ideas are the same. So I'm pretty proud of that too, and we've been able to move forward on a lot of things. And you're going to hear a lot more about that. You're going to hear, you know, the Renacci-Quigley bill and the Renacci. These are all people in the group that are working together. Next steps: maintain focus on cuts. Encourage a joint select committee on deficits to tackle the big issues and come up with a long solution to balance the budget. Pass the balance of budget amendment and send the states for their, for your voices to be heard. And continue working to limit the scope size of the federal government for the fiscal 2012 appropriations process. Next step: maintain focus on jobs, tax reform. We're all for it. We need to do it. Work towards a national all-the-above energy policy. And bring certainty and predictability to our job creators. I mean, it's easy for me to say because I was a job creator. I understand all this. I got to tell you, there's some people in Washington who drive me crazy because they don't even know what I'm talking about. That's pretty much the quick presentation. And before I open it up, I want to tell you a little bit, because a lot of people have sent us down there and said, we want you to cut and slash spending right now. We want you to get the balanced budget. We want you to balance the budget right now. Here's the problem. I continue to speak about it because we need help from all of you. And I didn't know this either before I got there, and I'll be the first one to admit it. We have programs Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security that were set up 41 years ago. Those programs were set up assuming that people would die at age 65. Now, these are facts. You can go back and look. All the programs were set up based on people dying at 65. The problem is we've had a great healthcare system that now, and prescription drugs and all the things that are going on that allow people to live to an average age of between 78 and 82. But the system hasn't changed. So you have a 41-year-old system, and you know this. If you had a 41-year-old water pump out in your yard or a 41-year-old furnace, at some point in time you've got to change the system to be able to take care of the new day that's going on. So what do we have today? Today we have 10,000, for the first time this year, 10,000 people in this country retiring per day. 10,000. So even when we cut costs, even if you cut costs by 10%, you have this large group of people getting on the Social Security system, getting on the Medicare system, and they're all coming onto a program that was set up 41 years ago. That's great. We understand that. But everybody has to understand that at some time that system is going to be broke. Medicare in 9 years will be broke if we do nothing. 9 years, it'll be insolvent. Social Security system will eventually be insolvent. Now, they'd say, well, the Social Security system is good for the next 23 years, and after that, it'll only pay out 73%. Come on. Does that mean it's solvent or insolvent? That means it's going in the wrong direction. It needs to be fixed. So we need to fix the systems. Now, since I've been in Washington, the first thing people say is, don't touch my system. Go somewhere else. Well, you saw that little that discretionary area. That's the only place we can go. So the Ryan budget plan that was passed by the House several months ago basically said if you're 55 and older, we're not going to touch Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. 55 and older. That gives anybody who's 55 years and older the opportunity to live within what they were promised by the federal government. But what it said was we've got to do something for people under 55. We have to change the system so that it's still solvent and still around. What we have to do is we have to get people engaged in the system. Now, we met with the President of the United States over the last few months, and I'll never forget this comment because he said, I understand we need to fix Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, but I'm not going to talk about it. He goes, because you guys will use it against me. And then he came up with this, he goes, and I understand what you want to do. You want to get people involved in their own system, and I understand that. He goes, hey, and he told us about a campaign. When he was on the campaign, he got a rash on his back. And he said, I went to the pharmacy, gave them my pharmacy card, they gave me the cream, I put the cream on my back. A couple weeks later, I was in another spot, gave them the card, got the cream, put it on my back. A couple weeks later, still had the rash, went to the pharmacy, didn't have my card. The pharmacy said, that'll be $400. He said, my rash is okay. And if you think about it, now that's the President of the United States saying that. And what that means is we have to engage in our own healthcare system. I went to the dentist for my annual checkup a couple weeks ago. I sat there and they go, well, hey, well, you know, you have your insurance. We need to do x-rays on your teeth. And I go, well, is it necessary? Don't matter. It's covered. And then they put me in this machine that goes around my head and starts doing x-rays. I said, time out. Do I need, why are you doing this? Well, it's a new system and we got to check everything around your head. And I wonder if it wasn't covered by insurance. If they would have said to me, Jim, that's going to cost you $1,000, whether I would have done it or not. So I mean, I'm even giving you real life experiences where I'm sure you all do the exact same thing. When we say that Americans have to engage in their own system, they have to be able to understand how much these things cost. Because nothing in this world is free, as we all know. My dad used to tell me that a long, long time ago. And ultimately, we're going to have to pay for this. So when we engage in our own system, we'll better understand why our system is going in the direction it is. We will not be able to balance the federal budget, I'm telling you this right now, unless we change Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. I know people hate to hear that. I know people don't want to hear it, but I'm sorry, that is the system. If you have 10 or 12% more people jumping on every year, even if you cut 5% or 6%, you've still got a system. Remember, costs are growing. You still have a system that eventually will swallow the entire federal government. I'm not saying eliminate it. Nobody in this world in the Republican Party is saying eliminate it. We're saying we need to look at it and change it. Now, what a lot of you don't understand is the president's health care bill, it did change it. And you know, people don't want to admit that he did attack the Medicare system. Cut out $500 billion, number one, in the Medicare system. And when I stand in a room that has many of the other side on it, they'll say, that was Medicare Advantage, that was Medicare Advantage, he cut from Medicare Advantage. Well, then my answer is, and this happened in Ken, well, wait a minute, isn't Medicare Advantage part of Medicare? Well, yeah. Well, then they cut $500 billion. The other thing is that he did, which people should be very upset about, I know we're trying to repeal this, but don't ever let the other side say that they're not going to go after Medicare and Medicaid, because they set up this IPAP board, 16 people that have they don't have to answer to anybody, appointed by the president, that will make decisions when you need a knee replacement, when you need heart surgery, when you need a lot of things. You know, I'm not even going to call them the death panel, because I agree, sometimes we use words that we don't need. This is an oversight board that will say, at some point in time, if you're 80 years old and you need this, this, and this, and you've already had this, this, and this procedure, you're not going to get it. That's how they're going to fix the healthcare system. And those people, those 12 members, have no oversight and can do whatever they want, and they can take care of your healthcare system. So if you think about it, would you rather be the ones engaged in fixing Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security, or do you want some board of 16 people making over $100,000 a year with not even Congress able to tell them what they should do and what they can't do, making decisions for you? Don't let the other side say they haven't attacked Medicare or Medicaid. They have. With that, I'll open it up for questions.
You mentioned with regard to taking care of the healthcare system for those 55 and under, and I get it, I understand it. Talk a little bit about probably HSAs and high deductible plans, but specifically, what are either you or your group or the Republicans in the House actually proposing that we do with regards to controlling spending on those 3 areas, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security?
Well, what we said in the budget was we're gonna do means testing. So if somebody, you know, nobody in this world said there are people that need taken care of. We understand that. And I don't think anybody in this room wants to kick the needy out the window and say that they shouldn't be taken care of. There are also people that don't need as much. So if you look at our plan, and it's in there, we would do means testing. Those that would need more would get more. Those that would need less would get less. I'm talking about subsidies. And then you ultimately would have your choice of Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security, or Medicare, Medicaid, I'm sorry, plans, and you would pick them. And then based on your means, you would have a subsidy from the federal government to help you. And then you can select what you want and what you don't want. You can decide what you want and what you don't want. Now the other side will say, oh, you're just going to cut their amount. Well, look, the system can't hold on right now. So you take somebody, good example, my dad's 86 years old. If he was sitting in this room right now, he would tell you, Jim, I go to a doctor and they give me hundreds of things. They give me pills here, and then they give me another pill there, and then they give me another pill here. I don't need this. I use him as an example because he'll say to you, the system's broken. I don't need all this. And quite frankly, I wouldn't mind contributing. My dad, you know, he was a railroad worker, and he ended up being a general manager of a company, but he worked his way up, no college education. So it's not like he's a multi-millionaire. I mean, he's just a normal Joe on the street, but he also realizes that he could probably take care of more. That's the kind of system we need to do. We need to evaluate what we can take care of, what we can't.
Yes, in my experience as a landlord, I've run across at least 3 people on Social Security disability that are excluded the system. I read recently that fund only has so long to go for the Social Security disability. What I believe is a separate fund from the general Social Security. Now, what is the government doing to try to weed these people out?
Well, keep in mind how big the government is, and I think I think it's easy, one thing I've learned in the last 9 months, it's pretty easy to say, well, I heard about this one situation in this one town, in this one community, we got to go after that situation. It is such a big, massive situation that until we get it reeled in, we do have fraud and waste in the system, and we have to reel that in. But you know how you reel it in? You start squeezing the dollars back. You know, if you squeeze the dollars back, pretty soon all fraud goes away because there's no room for fraud. So the first place you do to get rid of fraud and abuse is you roll the dollars back, and pretty soon, if I'm in the system and somebody else is in the system, you're starting to say, wait a minute, that guy doesn't belong in the system, I do, and you start to reel it back real quick. We have to get to that point, so.
Is Obama deliberately, I forgot my word, I'm the old part. Is he deliberately dismantling our economy so that he can establish socialism here in the United States?
You know, it's interesting because people ask that question. I don't believe Obama is doing this intentionally. I don't think he knows what he's doing.
Yes.
That's the problem. There's no. I saw you starting to shake your head right away when I said that, because it's the truth. If you know, can you imagine? I always use this example. Would you ever get on an airplane where the pilot has never flown a plane before?